Welcome back to another WIP Wednesday, Daydreamer. Today we're going to be working on an action base.
Have you ever been building a kit while daydreaming about building another kit? That's how you get to WIP Wednesdays.
WIP Wednesday!
Ragtag Daydreams is sponsored by NewTypeHQ.com.
So, have you ever been working on a kit and you just know it's gonna be great? You want it to really look good on your shelf, but to get a dynamic pose, you definitely need to have an action base or something similar. I know that I think there's a lot of different stands and bases and things like that, but today I'm working with a 1/100 scale action base, mainly because it has a lot of details on the base. It has a lot of details on there. You may have noticed that if you've ever gotten one, and it doesn't matter what color, if it's clear, if it's black, whatever, it doesn't matter. The details are there, but there's nothing there. There's no two-tone color, three-tone color. There's no oomph. And no, we don't want to take away from the awesome kit that we just made, but wouldn't it be great if the base was customized as well? Well, today we're going to be hand painting an action base, and I'm going to show you what you can do with. I'm using quite a few colors, but what you can use if you have some metallics, maybe a dark or light gray laying around. It's amazing what you can do with these things whenever you just give it a little more love, and you don't need an airbrush to do it. That means this opens the possibility up to a lot of people out there who either don't have an airbrush yet or who are intimidated by it. I was intimidated by an airbrush for a long time, and with some colors I actually still am a little intimidated. White, for instance, whites and yellows, especially the brighter yellows, I have a really big problem with. I don't know what it is. So anyway, you'll notice that if you're into painting. If you're not, again, this is very beginner friendly, and if you want to see more beginner friendly content or works in progress from me, please let me know below. If you like this kind of stuff, like the video, subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. Now let's get to work. Okay, so for today's purposes, I am just going to be painting out of the cap. I know a lot of times more experienced painters will not tell you to do this. It's just something where I'm trying to keep this very, very beginner friendly. Paint out of the cap, make sure to shake your paints very, 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 very well, and you shouldn't have too much of a problem to do this. If your paints do not allow you to paint out of the cap, like the Tamiya paints that I'm using here, I'll be using some Vallejo later on. I'm not going to be painting out of the cap there because, one, the cap will not sit properly. It'll tip over just due to the shape. And two, I just don't want to make a huge mess where the Tamiya pots, paint pots, are much more forgiving if you want to paint out of the cap. What I normally do is I will have a dry palette of just little dips in the white tray. I think everybody has seen those at any Walmart or Joann's or Michael's or Hobby Towns, Hobby Lobbies. They're just a simple white plastic piece that has divots along the outside, and it helps you to just separate the paints that you have and that you're
working with. Of course, sometimes you can just use a scrap piece of tin foil, a paper plate, just, you know, anything. But you don't have to have a wet palette to paint. You don't have to have a wet palette to hand paint. You don't have to have super special things. You can go and get yourself a nice brush that doesn't cost a lot. I think a set of these 3 brushes cost about $8, and I'm using one of the 3 right here. They are sable brushes. It's nothing Winsor & Newton, you know, $30 a brush, $100 sets. I don't use the expensive things because, frankly, I'm using them. I'm putting them through their paces, and I'm still learning myself. So, I mean, why learn on the stuff that you can destroy? Learn the skills, practice, and then upgrade your stuff. This hobby does not have to be expensive. Also, guys, keep in mind that I am going around the edges. I'm taking my time. I'm making sure that the paint is not overloaded on the brush. There's just an adequate amount there. If you can see it pooling, like there's an actual drop of paint on the tip of the brush, you got a little too much paint there. Thinning the paints is a whole big thing that you're going to get used to over time, and adding a little bit of water or what have you to your paints to get it to the consistency that you like. This is something that's really it's a trial and error kind of thing. This is a great project to try that out on, as a matter of fact. But once you have your paints the way that you want them, you want to make sure that an adequate amount is on the brush, and then I would suggest in painting something like this that you're going to outline everything. Frame up what you're doing, outline it. You may get out of line sometimes, you may make mistakes. That's okay. This is a good chance to practice hand painting for later on, whenever you need to be a little more controlled, when you need to paint within certain panel lines, for instance. And also, don't be afraid that you're doing something wrong because you don't get a lot of coverage on the first coat. Most of this stuff is going to get 2 to 3 coats on it, if not more. If you're going to cover something that's dark like this, the black plastic, with something that is a much lighter color, which will be happening later, you're going to have to expect to put more coats on. Lighter coats that with thinner paints are always better than thicker coats and less coats. You're going to see things like brush strokes. It's going to have a texture, possibly, things like that. If you put the paint on too thick, if you put the paint on too thin, that's where you can often find where it will almost pool. So what I mean by that is you may have a lot of color and saturation of that color around the edges, but where pieces get flat, like in the center of it, it will draw up. It's that whole surface tension kind of idea. If you're familiar with, you know, different surface tension of liquids and how they stick to surfaces and things like that, you start getting into a weird spot there, especially, again, with lighter colors. If they are too thin, you will end up having almost like an outline that fades into darker spots in the middle of a flat plate panel. It's just the kind of thing that happens. If it's a curved surface, then gravity is going to pull that to the lowest point, and you're essentially going to be painting with a wash. It's not going to come out correctly. But just try everything out, get used to your paints, and if you are experienced, then disregard this. You already kind of know how thin your paints need to be and how you like to paint, and with all that kind of thing, the consistency that you know that you like to paint with, because everybody is a little bit different, but there's a rule of thumb that still applies regardless of who you are. But yeah, I'm framing everything out here, and then I'm trying to color in all that stuff so I can get rid of any of the precision work in the beginning, and then it's just filling the spaces. It's just like drawing something with pencil. You're going to do your outline first and then color it in.
So here we go. I mean, I think that's kind of cool. Personally, it's something that I will really enjoy finishing out. There's a few panels here that I did not paint. I think I'm going to leave that as is, but I may give it a good wash of some sort to just to bring out some of the other parts and pieces and whatnot, and then it'll be good to go. To do that, I will be using my airbrush though, so I didn't want to include that in this video. The reason I'm going to use the airbrush is I'm going to put a top coat on it before I do any washes or panel lines or any of that stuff. I use an airbrush because that's what I have, but you can just as easily use a rattle can of any kind of clear coat that you prefer. As always, like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you're not already, leave me a comment below if you really want to see more stuff with hand painting or anything that came to mind. Until next time, Daydreamer, I'm Justin, your ragtag Daydreamer, and I'll see you soon.